You know, I'm something of a podcast myself. I'm something of a podcast myself. You know, I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast myself.
All right. Welcome to the 4th episode of Something of a Podcast. The only podcast brave enough to say, I'm something of a podcast myself. I'm something of a host, Mike Gamms. With me, as always, is the very talented Kai VonDoom. Say hello, Kai.
Hello.
And joining us this week, we have a very special guest. Say hello, Karma.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
So, Karma is a stand-up comic, activist, all-around badass person, currently based in the Western New York area.
Correct, in Buffalo.
In Buffalo, nice. And we'll dive into all that in a little bit. We're going to do a deep dive on Karma's origin story, see if there's any what sort of hero's journey we have, or maybe even some villain turns. Who knows? We'll find out what's in store for us. But first, I figure let's talk about some news items, comedy news, media news, and it wouldn't be an episode of Something of a Podcast if I didn't rant and rave about Saturday Night Live. So did either of you, Kai or Karma, happen to see this week's Saturday Night Live, hosted by Sydney Sweeney?
Oh, I saw memes about it, but I did not see it.
Okay.
You can already guess. You can already guess what the memes were about, though.
Yeah, I know. I'm aware of everything surrounding it, and I know, and that it's okay. That's the whole conversation that could be had about the episode about Sydney Sweeney and the way that a majority of the sketches objectified her body and played on her being hot, which is exactly what they did when Jacob Elordi was on there too. Is the same exact shit, but it's all anyone ever does with Sydney Sweeney, and that's a whole other conversation about that. But the reason I bring up Saturday Night Live is actually the main thing I want to talk about is before Sydney Sweeney even comes onto the stage. It's the cold opening. Because I think the cold openings are always like kind of really important. That's when they do their most political stuff. They do their impressions, and that kind of like shows the tone of where they're at politically and the agenda with which they're pushing, right? So this week on the cold open, they actually got a ton of pushback from liberal Democrats that were upset and angry about the cold open, which is funny to me because I watched the cold open and I was immediately filled with rage. I wanted to throw my computer across the room, and it was for the exact opposite reason as the sort of shit liberals, Democrats. So I will explain. The sketch is basically a series of politicians, starting with California Governor Gavin Newsom, all played by different people, all like prominent liberal Democrats, being asked by a reporter basically about Joe Biden to defend the accusation that he's Sleepy Joe. And each one of these consecutive, there's like 5 of them, different characters come on and give like full throat endorsements of Joe Biden, like going so hard, like you're gonna call him old. Well, he almost to the level of like Chuck Norris jokes, like he it works 27 hours a day and there's only 24, like that kind of joke. He's solving this crisis, he's doing this, all while doing this. And like each one, it's just like they're talking about all this stuff, right? And then at the very end, it says, okay, we're gonna cut to Joe Biden or whatever. Cuts to Joe Biden, and it's like 2 seconds, and he has an issue with his monitor and it goes black like a boomer who can't use technology, right? And then it cuts back to Heidi Gardner, and she's like, live from New York, it's Saturday night, yada yada. The liberals are seething mad. They're like, how dare you criticize Joe Biden for being old? Trump is 77. Trump is 77, yada yada. Trump is this old. Well, what about Trump? What about Trump? What about Trump? Right? They're saying that it's an unfair criticism, that he's old. I'm going to lose my mind, friends, because it is literally, it's the exact opposite of what they're saying. They spent the entire time, the only criticism that they do of him at all is saying that the only criticism there is of him is that he's old, and they're mocking that as being the only critique of him. Like, that's the only thing anybody could have an issue with about Joe Biden, is that he's old, and they're kind of making fun of that.
They should have been upset for a different reason. I feel like they should have just been right at the gate saying, it's Genocide Joe. You know?
Right. That's why I was mad.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's genocide. No, the reason we don't like Joe Biden isn't because he's 80 years old. That's part of it. But if he was 80 years old and he wasn't committing genocide, you know, it'd be a different story. That's the main issue, is that.
So let me get this straight. They were trying to riff on, they were kind of tongue in cheek about, oh, this is the only criticism that anybody could have. And were they trying to hint that he's been super complicit in Israel's war crimes against the Palestinians?
None of that comes up. It doesn't come up.
Definitely
at all.
not.
Nowhere near.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say.
Anywhere near anything. It's just them saying that he's not sleepy. He's got more energy than an Energizer Bunny, basically. There's jokes in there. I can't remember what they were.
Who says that?
Yeah, I mean, I made that up, but I don't think he says that exactly, but stuff like that.
Okay,
right?
you said that.
I said that.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, right out the gate, it's basically doing Joe Biden softball cupcake coverage, and the liberals are seething mad that it's even remotely critical of him. Every single week we have Trump on there, which is fine. It's like they can't have any criticism of Joe Biden without it being predicated with Trump worst, but, or else they like jump down your throats.
Yeah, I don't think that's the right perspective.
No. I have to watch the cold open, but
yeah, I'm ranting about something y'all haven't seen, but like you could get a picture of it. Like, it is just like the most toothless criticism of, you know, Joe Biden, and that's the sort of visceral reaction to it. But I digress. Like, I could talk about Saturday Night Live on and on and on every single episode, and I'm gonna try to keep that to a minimum. So
I don't watch SNL. I wish you had told me that was something you were gonna talk about. I would have watched it.
I mean, I hate watch it every week and talk about it every week. I mean, I assumed you had listened to every No, I'm just teasing you. You would have known that we.
The hot seat.
I agree. Probably should have let you know that.
Yeah, no, that's my bad. I should have briefed you on that, but it was just something it just came up. I just seen it yesterday and was seething mad, and it's just the way in which the liberals try to like wash everything with this sort of, you know, they try to. The propaganda, and then even their propaganda is criticized for not being propaganda enough. by themselves, like their own side. It's but I digress.
Tell me how you
Anything?
really feel.
Yeah, right. Um, Kai, what else is new with you? Anything pressing we should discuss?
I've barely even had time to like watch anything.
Yeah. Um, there's a couple things I've been watching. Abbott Elementary, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Those are both good. I've been
Oh
watching
yeah,
them.
Curb. Mhm.
And yeah, but all right. I think without further ado, I think it's time that we dive into the origin story of karma. Um,
All right, origin story. What do you want to know? Do you want to know the comedy origin story? Do you want to know how I ended up in Buffalo of all places? Do you want
all
to
the
know my
above, all the
activism
above.
origin? Okay. So, I was born and raised in Queens, New York City. Kind of like in the
Like Peter
what you would
Parker,
consider, what was that?
like Peter Parker.
Exactly.
See, already
Um,
starting out like Spider-Man. We're on the right path here.
um, I did eat an ant one time, but that's neither here nor there. I just was
Did you get
curious.
ant-like powers after you did?
No, no, I didn't. I think the ant became like a queer Indonesian comedian after he got bit by me though, so look at that.
I see. The opposite effect. That's
Yeah,
kind of a funny concept, like your version of Spider-Man, when the spider bites you, it becomes more like the human. Yeah, that's great.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's
But
awesome.
so yeah, I grew up in like the quieter part of Queens. Had access to the entire 5 boroughs, so I also grew up in like Union Square and going to shows in the city and all this stuff and seeing way too much, going to raves in Brownsville, Brooklyn and stuff like
Right, and
that.
this is when
Um,
you have access to all this when you're growing up as a kid,
you have
or
access to everything. I mean, when you're a kid, you just have time, and if you have a Metro card, time plus 2 rides a day means you can go anywhere, really.
were you going and seeing comedy then when you were a kid, or
No.
when did the comedy
So
came in
I
later,
didn't
right?
even like I wasn't a huge comedy fan growing up. I had a major comedy crush on Jim Carrey, and that's about it. And all of like I don't know, all my friends loved George Carlin, but I never really got into it. I just thought they were really funny, and it wasn't something that I studied. Like I feel like now
Mm,
people study comedy,
yeah.
it's like they kind of assign themselves homework to watch this special or like whatever. And I kind of do that now where I'll go to comedy shows because I'm like, oh, this is a person that I really look up to. I'm gonna have a good time, but I'm also gonna learn a lot. So it's kind of like homework in that sense.
Mm.
But it really wasn't on my radar. Like the city is super competitive. I was in public school and I wanted to get into a good college. So I took like all honors and APs and I was in varsity lacrosse. Like I was trying to do something, and I didn't
Right.
even
Oh, you played
stop to ask
lacrosse?
myself, what do I want to do? I was just like so concerned with, okay, how do I make money to survive in this place? Because even as I was growing up, things were changing so much, and so I was like, it was just survival mentality for the longest time. And then it wasn't until I graduated from grad school actually, and I was living in Albany, graduated right at the height of the pandemic, and I also broke up with my long-term boyfriend and moved out, and so that was a rough time. And I reached out to like the only friends that I had who weren't part of my program and met them at the bar, and then their friends were both comedians.
Mm.
And hung out with them more, and then another friend that I made was also a comedian. So I was like, this is the third person that I've met in the last month that's a comedian. What is the universe trying to tell me? And I've always had, I'm sure everybody, like more people, more non-comics than comics have a notes app where they're like, I'm working on my, first 5 minutes or whatever. But I had that too. And I would always name or title my stories that I would like to tell to my friends as like the green dot story, or like that time I was gay, homeless, and dying on mushroom story. Like I always had like titles to my stories. And then the first time I did it, because apparently all my friends are comedians, and so they would look at me, the only civilian friend that they had, and say, come out to the open mic, blah blah blah, like we're trying to
And then
make you laugh.
and eventually you went from civilian to
To-
non-civilian.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
so how long have
And
you been doing comedy then? When did you first start?
I have the exact date on my phone. Like I recorded my first ever set, which I don't know how I feel about that. Like I'm too scared to ever look at my first ever set, but it was about 3 years ago. We're coming up on 3 years.
Oh, cool.
And the first time I did it was like an out of body experience. I'm pretty sure I blacked out, but I didn't do horribly. Like it was, it's different than like doing an open mic in New York City. Like these are just Albany comics in the crowd, they're just like, they want you
Right.
to do well, at least in the beginning. They want
So
you to
that
do
was the
well.
first time you went up was in Albany.
Yeah, in Albany. And I didn't
And what
do
brought you to
horribly.
Albany? You said, oh, you went to college there?
I went to grad school
Oh,
there.
grad school there. But you had been in New York up until then?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and then moved to Albany. That's a big change, right?
Yeah, and I feel like it was the first time that I was um really embracing self-expression was when I moved out. I don't know. My household was very the opposite of liberating.
I
Like,
see.
I felt
Yeah, I can
so
relate.
liberated when I moved out. So I was like, oh my God, I dyed my hair pink immediately. Like it was crazy. Like, what am I
It's
doing?
funny. You are maybe the only person I've ever heard of that like moved from New York City to Albany to get more creative and express yourself. It's usually like the opposite. But you because that's where you grew up and that's where your family and home is you felt
Yeah,
more maybe
exactly.
restricted there in your family and you're able to be yourself when you had your own space. But it's
For
kind of funny
sure.
to think about like you went from New York City this like to Albany to
Don't talk shit about Albany though, Mike.
I'm from Rochester, so we're even further down the totem pole
But
than
it's
that.
it's different when you're born and raised in a very tight-knit religious community. I just never felt like I could really be myself because I had a bunch of, aunts looking to talk shit about me. And they did. They absolutely talked
Yeah.
shit about every young girl, what they perceived as young girls becoming women, if they were too voluptuous, which is something that is completely out of your control. They would say that you're sexually active, and it's just like such an invasion of privacy. And I hated it. I just hated it. I remember I cut all my hair. I like shaved my head, and then I got this piercing right here. And then all of a sudden, all of the older women were like, are they like a lesbian now? Like, what is it? And I was like, close. Like, so close.
Yeah, every
But
time I cut my hair, my family says the same thing. They're like, okay, so you're gay now.
okay, now, like,
We're like,
not
okay,
before.
sure.
Okay, but
Uh,
yeah, so it's different, people who come to New York City where they don't have the community that they grew up with, and they get a blank slate, and I didn't get that growing up in New York City, so my blank
yeah.
slate was Albany.
Is that when in Albany, is that when you started getting into more activism and like sort of leftist stuff and direct action and
No.
kind of stuff?
So I was an activist first. Actually, I was a scientist first, then an activist, and then now a comedian. I knew
Peter
I wanted to
Parker
be
parallels here. Like you totally have the same Spider-Man origin story. Young scientist
I
growing
know.
up in Queens, conscious of the class struggle.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I miss from the old, storyline is that there was so much of an understanding of that class struggle, and now everybody's just sucking Iron Man's dick. Like, come
Yeah,
on, give me the new
supposedly in the next one, that's what we're doing. We're resetting Spider-Man's universe for him to be poor and not have any friends. But we're not talking about Spider-Man right now. I mean, we're
Yeah, we're
always
not.
talking about Spider-Man. Always are. But yeah, so you said you were active in that kind of stuff in New York then. You were activist first.
Yes, I was an activist first. I got politicized in high school. I was just like little punk rock kid, you
Was there
know,
a
and
specific thing that really radicalized you, or just sort of was it like the process of growing up and stuff?
it was definitely like the police presence. That was my first thing. The
Yeah.
first
New York
organization that
City,
I
you can't understate how present the police are in New York
yeah,
City. Every block, every corner,
it's
it's
so
like
much worse than when
New
I
York
grew up.
City is occupied. I see. It's worse now than it used to be.
Absolutely.
But that was still some
Absolutely.
of that then, right? That's what you're saying. It was when you started noticing that and the
Oh
increase in
yeah.
that.
We had cops in our
And that's
school.
under Bloomberg probably, right? Stop and frisk
Yep.
era.
Yep, we were fighting stop and frisk a lot. So I joined my friend actually was the one who has a family friend who she like ran for mayor, she visited Cuba, super radical, and she was like, come join Cop Watch, you know, come do Cop Watch with us. And so me and my friend did Cop Watch. Like we would go out until 2 a.m. and we would make sure that in any interaction between the cops and you know, just a pedestrian would turn out okay. And that was before, you know, that was kind of when the documentation of police wasn't really a thing that was so in our face. That was really just like the turning point of when people were like, oh shit, like this isn't a new thing, it's just documented more now. And we, you know, people saw the value more than now in providing visual evidence for police brutality. I think now we realize that cops are just treated with a different set of laws, even
Correct.
when presented with visual evidence. So there's different tactics now.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But I get what
and
you're saying, like at that time at least, this is something I used to say all the time too. The best weapon we have, the only weapon we have is a camera.
right. And it wasn't something that every person did. It was something that like you did if you were trained and were
Right.
equipped with, you know, some skills, some de-escalation skills, some knowledge on, you know, you had right to know training or know your rights, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Right. Know
Right
your
to
rights
know
training.
is
Yes.
different.
Yes.
No,
Yeah, and knowing what to film and more importantly, what
yeah.
not to film.
What not to film, how not to escalate it so that the person you're trying to help actually is put in more danger, how to make sure you're not in danger. So it was a very like, you know, we thought a lot about it back then. I feel like now everybody just whips out their camera and I don't know, I feel some type of way about it, but it's just the evolution of things and technology. I'm actually reading a book right now about artificial intelligence and just different types of intelligence, and it's I used to think AI was just a topic in sci-fi that I could nerd out with my friends about, but now it's just like a word that everybody says,
Mm.
artificial intelligence, you know, and there's definitely a lot of use of that in policing and surveillance. So it's cray cray. Oh, cray cray.
Yeah, it's advancing quite at rapid levels. Like all of the worst ways in which technology can be used, the police do that, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in Albany,
Yep.
finishing grad school, starting comedy, um, brought your activism, like entered, brought your activist mindset with you to Albany, and
Oh, for sure.
yeah, and then I moved to Buffalo after that, right? And I think that's when I met you. Is sometime shortly after that.
Yeah. How did you come across my Instagram? Because all of a sudden I got a message from Mike Gamms saying, "Hey, will you be on this show?" And I said, "Of course, I'm a comic. You don't even have to pay me.
Yeah.
I'll do it for
And
free."
that show was the Finger Lakes Queer Liberation Pride Festival in 2022. I mean, there's no good way to put no let's see, better way to put how I found you. It's just that I'm an internet, you know, junkie. I spend a lot of time clicking around, particularly when I'm booking a show and I'm trying to meet and find um, queer leftist comedians. So people that are both activists and queer to perform at Pride Festival in the greater area. So I'm clicking around to different Pride flyers and I'm vetting everyone, and I'm looking at their profile and looking for a clip of them doing comedy and looking to see if they're like going to be in line with what we're trying to do politically. And then I found a diamond in the rough, which is Karma, and was like, oh my God, I have to have them. No, I have to have them. We want them to come here to do the show. It would be amazing. And you did. And I don't know. I don't know if Kai knows this, but so that year we were doing Comedy Runway at the Pride
Yeah.
Festival, which is a comedy fashion show where the comedians are judged for their outfit and outfit only. And our friend Karma here came in a burlap sack bag as a dress. A burlap sack turned into a dress.
A dress. Yeah.
Ridiculous. And incredible. And so
Thank
that
you.
was
I
the
didn't
first time I met
realize.
you. It was fun
So
meeting
I
you from the
didn't
internet.
win. We had a straight dude win.
Yeah, Chris Thompson, who
And
we
Chris
love, and hopefully we'll
Thompson.
have Chris Thompson on the show sometime soon.
I was pissed.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
I made my own outfit too. What? But the judges said it was because it's been done before, and I didn't realize that. So
Judges were pretty strict that year.
they were so.
And then from there, the three of us actually, Kai was there then. We did the Justice League of Queers panel at the Flower City Comic Con. Last year. That was maybe just after the Pride Festival, maybe a couple months after Pride. Yeah, it was in September, so that was great. And then
That was awesome.
yeah, that was super fun. But then most recently, at the end of the year, we all collaborated with Chris Thompson, who you mentioned. You organized a sort of a benefit for Palestine in Rochester, and Kai and I performed on the show.
Yep.
Yeah.
It did. And we were able to raise almost $200, which it's not a lot, but it's something.
No, that's great. I had a
And
lot of fun. It was a great time. We had like-minded people, and
yeah,
you've been a really dedicated and strong voice for that cause. You've been pretty active on that. I see. You're always posting about it, and it's great. You seem to be right
it's
on point.
honestly the least that we can do, I feel like.
Correct.
We're always on social media, and even if we're not, right? Like, we're talking to people, we should be talking about it all the time. And the thing with social media is that your attention is the currency on social media. So we're gonna have to use that in any way that we can. And some people will say, what are you doing besides just on Instagram posting? But people forget that changing people's minds is also a revolutionary act. Like, raising awareness is a revolutionary act. Think of all the topics that we are now able to just go up to somebody we may not know that well and talk about something that it wasn't even on the radar 10 years ago.
Right.
Like, there's so many things that
Constantly
weren't on
learning, you know?
Yeah. Like, I don't even know if anybody knew what reparations was like 15 years ago, you know? Like, at least in my school.
The
So, like,
overall conversations progress, and you need to, like, we progress like with them. I'm much more advanced than I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I'm able to have more nuanced conversations about more variety of things, you know? More
right.
educated, particularly on this issue as well. The Israeli government's occupation and the genocide of Palestinian people.
And I think the best thing to do when you're feeling so crushed by the daily atrocities that this world is just letting happen is to organize and get together, because that's the last thing that they want you to do. They don't want you to go out there and find like-minded people to keep you from, spiraling, downward spiraling all by yourself where you're the most ineffective. It's really powerful to go out there and I don't know, be in each other's power. So
For sure. I guess on this subject, I did want to bring up something, and I'm sure y'all have seen this happened, I think, just earlier this week, but I'm sure you've seen, what's his name, Aaron Bushnell,
Yep.
the Air Force. For those that don't know, and you should know, I'm gonna say it because they're suppressing this information, but I think he's 25-year-old man who is an Air Force veteran, United States Air Force veteran, in full military fatigues, self-immolated as an act of protest against the Israeli occupation of Palestine, which means he lit himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy while yelling "Free Palestine." And I think an act like that is worth. It needs to be acknowledged, you know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And
Mhm.
there was that picture of a cop just pointing his gun at this man who is on fire.
Yes, pointing this, and you can hear the fire. Someone, EMS or whoever arrives, and they're like, "We don't need a gun. We need fire extinguishers." But
Yeah.
like American police, and I think this guy was Secret Service. Their only thing they know is to point a gun at something.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, yeah, it's a really powerful form of protest that shouldn't be taken lightly.
No.
And you know, I
Okay.
know all growing up that there was the monk who did a similar act in Vietnam, and that was something that we learned in school or seeing pictures of. And you would think
Mhm.
that something like this would also have that effect, but because it's against it's so clearly against the powers that are in charge of so much, it's like it's being suppressed, and even the way in which they've been reporting on it, um, they're trying to spin it as, you know, mental illness or being sort of unclear on what his message was. But if you look it up, I don't have time to go into all of it. This
Mm-hmm.
young man was very, very, very clear what his
Yeah.
intentions were and the
eh,
reasons why he was doing it.
I just gotta say real quick because I have to go, but
You
I
do.
have yeah, I have his last words pulled up right now, and I just want to read them because I think it's super important. He
Please do.
said, "My name is Aaron Bushnell. I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it is not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." And I think it's awesome that, like, you know, now CNN and all these different, news outlets have to say these words. They have to say that Israel has been complicit in genocide. Those are words that they have to repeat now because those were Aaron Bushnell's last words. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind with this.
Yeah, that's a really
Thank you
powerful
for that, guys.
statement. And I know you said you have to go, and it's about time for us to, you know, take our break, and then the listeners will be back with our top three discussion. They'll come back after the break. But I guess real quick before we go, Karma, you can find Karma on Instagram, karma.on.comedy, right?
That's right. That's right.
Very funny and super on point. Anything else you want to plug?
I have a show in 2 months in Albany. And I don't know if you have like a pride show that needs a little comedy, whoever's listening, you want to organize it. We always need more organizers. You too
Yeah.
can be an organizer. Let's
If
do
you
it. Let's
build
do
it, we
it.
will come.
Yeah, exactly.
uh,
And that's it for me. Thank you for listening.
all right. So on that note, we'll see y'all in a little bit. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. from our little break there. We are gonna talk about now this week we have our top 3 every week, and this week our top 3 is our top 3 TV shows that were canceled too soon. So I'm excited to get into that debate. I'm sure Kai is too, huh, Kai?
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
But real quick, before we get into that, I have some listener comments from our last week's top 3 I wanted to talk about, if that's cool. So on
Okay.
YouTube, on our YouTube page, Paper Mache Heart, cool name, wrote, my favorite is The Flash, Barry Allen, because he's my second favorite hero after Spider-Man. Then after that, can I consider the Green Lantern Corps as a character? No, I'm going with Kyle Rayner then, because he was coming up as the Green Lantern of Sector 2814 when I started reading comics. And number 3 is the main man, the last Zarnian, the ultimate Bastige himself, Lobo.
Oh, I love Lobo.
Okay, because I mean,
He's
I
a
know the
great
Flash.
character.
I know the Flash, but I don't really know those other two. But I thought maybe, I mean, I'm familiar with the Green Lantern, and I'm guessing that's like a sub part of the Green Lantern.
Mhm.
But I figured it would mean more to something to you. It's kind of almost like it's a foreign language to me, but
I think you'd like Lobo. He's kind of like an anti-hero-esque, kind of like mercenary, just like badass character.
okay, cool. I'll have to check them out. And Paper Mache Heart also went on to add about because remember we talked about Doom Patrol because Crazy Jane was one of my picks, and we were talking about I think Umbrella Academy briefly in there. So
Yep.
they went on to say Gerard Way also wrote some for Doom Patrol. He collabed with
Yes, he did. Yes.
DC's
I can't
Young
believe I
Animal
forgot.
imprint, amongst others, Shade the Changing Girl, Doom Patrol, and Far Sector, which introduced a new Green Lantern, a woman of color named Sojourner Moline.
Yes, I can't believe I forgot to mention that.
So you know
Yeah.
about this. That's
Mhm.
cool. Yeah, I don't. That's a great comment from Paper Mache Heart. So thank you for adding that. Yeah, you know more about what I'm talking about than I do, so that's always good. uh, but with that out of the way, I would like to get into our this week's top 3. And like I said, it's our top 3 TV shows that were canceled too soon, or before they should have been, or however you want to phrase it. And last week I think I went first with all my picks. This week I want you to go first, and I want to alternate. Like you go one, I go one, you go one, if that's cool.
Okay. Yep.
So you're up.
So, all right. So the first show I'm going to say is My Name is Earl. So
Okay.
I have some caveats to this, but I'm a huge sitcom girly. Like I love sitcoms. They're my bread and butter. Like I want to be a sitcom writer one day. And My Name is Earl, in the early seasons, it was one of the most well-written sitcoms I've ever seen. Like amazing concept. The characters, even though the show was so just zany and ridiculous, the characters felt so realistic. Like they felt like people I know. Like I don't know white collar workers. I know scammers and like baby mamas. So like My Name is Earl is definitely, near and dear to my heart. But the reason I said I have a caveat to this is because the last season was terrible. So
Mm.
I understand why it was canceled. But if it would have kept going like the first 2 seasons, like I would love to get some resolution there and know like if you ever finished the list, or have you seen the show?
I have, yeah. So I didn't finish it all, but I loved the show. That's what I was gonna add. Well, how many seasons did they do? Do you know?
Let me double check. I think it was 5.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of it, but not every single episode. But I do very much enjoy this show. particularly when it aired. At the time and still to this day, Mallrats is one of my favorite movies. So like Jason Lee and Ethan Suplee as the two main characters in My Name is Earl are both in that movie, and it's totally
Yes.
was my like exact sort of, you know, kind of that's it was true to life, that sort of world that they lived in to me. And Jamie
It
Presley
was.
was great. And Darnell, is that what, Crabman, awesome
Yes,
character.
Crabman.
I enjoy that show a lot. I have to look it up, but I seen a deep dive YouTube video on it recently, like on the whole history of My Name is Earl and all that. I'll have to send it to you, or I'll have to try to bring it up next week if I can find it, or whatever. But no, that's a great choice. Great choice.
Yes.
My Name is Earl. Excellent. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, okay, so for my first choice for TV shows canceled too soon, I'm gonna go with a recent example, most recent example. So this is a show, was maybe my favorite show of 2023, and was just canceled in November after one season.
Okay.
And that is arguably one of my favorite shows ever, Muppet Mayhem. Did you watch Muppet Mayhem?
No, I have
You
not
did
seen it.
not. That's why it was canceled. But let me explain. Do you know much about Muppet Mayhem?
No.
Okay, so fantastic. I'm excited. Muppet Mayhem is the newest Muppet TV show, and it is a TV show about the band Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, the band from the Muppets. You know, I'm sure you've seen them. They're like the ragtag rock and roll band or
No.
whatever. And it is a sort of, it's basically like a rock and roll show, almost like it's got Dewey Cox vibes to it. It's got like, it sort of is a parody of kind of music shows, but also while being a music show. And in this world, which sort of is like almost like a real life world, but with Muppets and the Muppet Band, they're like the greatest rock band of all time, like the Rolling Stones, Grateful Dead, whatever, but they've never put out an album because they're Muppets and they're just like goofing off. So the whole show's about them trying to put out their first album. And it has all the like story beats of like rock and roll shows and cameos and like, you know, essentially doing drugs in the desert, but the Muppet version of it. And one of the main characters is Taj Mowry,
Oh,
like
wow.
smart guy, you know, and he plays like their
Yes.
super fan. And then the music is fantastic. If you like dad rock and classic rock and like rock and roll movies and TV shows, you will love this show. If you like Muppets, you will love this show. And for some reason, they canceled it after one season. And it is really, really upsetting to me. I've watched it several times. Each episode has several songs and like musical numbers. Some of them are covers, some of them are original songs. And it not only that, but like there's moments where you almost like want to cry. It's like so moving. They have like really good story on top of that. And the main lead is played by Lily Singh, who I didn't really know before this show, but I guess she was like a big YouTuber or something. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention. Oh, it won the Emmy this year for Best Children's or Family Program, the Emmy,
Oh, wow.
and they canceled it.
Yeah, I've never even heard of it.
Correct.
That's
That's part of the reason why you've never even heard of it. Do you like Muppets?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It
this
sounds like
show
a
is so great. It's got like a mockumentary element to it sometimes too. Like, and you have Animal, who's like one of the best characters ever, and you get into his backstory, each of the band members' backstory, and then also they're like, you know, stories about them trying to get like, you know, get along and produce music and like the struggles of being an artist, and like they're sort of kind of anti-capitalist without being anti-capitalist because they're like the Muppets. They're very much like free spirit, hippie, like out there type band. So they kind of reject the whole system. And, you know, it's super great. and I could talk about it forever. And it's yeah, but that's that. All right.
I love Taj Mowry, so I'm definitely gonna have to check that out. It sounds right up
Yeah,
my alley.
yeah, it's great.
So yeah. So my next show is also something that's fairly recent. It just got canceled, I think either late last year or earlier this year. So it's called Rap Shit. Have you heard of it?
I have. I heard of Rap Shit and I heard that it was canceled, but I also have not seen it and I don't know a lot about it. It was on HBO, right?
Yep, it's on HBO. It was created by Issa Rae.
I
And
see, right. Which is from Insecure, right?
yes, so one of my, she was also in the Barbie movie. She played President Barbie, iconic.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my old, like favorite old school, like YouTubers from back in the day, Kid Fury, he was one of the writers and he also made guest appearances on the show. So it kind of was about these like two female rappers, kind of similar storyline to the lives of the City Girls. I don't know if you've ever heard of that rap group. So it
Mm-hmm.
basically was like the City Girls, it's like they're in Miami, they're like coming up from the hood and like scamming and scheming while like
Mm-hmm.
trying to make it in the music business and not being taken seriously because they're just like making home music or whatever. Like there was a lot of different elements to the storyline that we just don't see resolved at all. And it's
Mm-hmm.
killing me. Like the soundtrack was amazing. The music was way better than most of the stuff that's on like modern hip hop radio these days. It was just a great show. It was so funny. The cast was amazing. A lot of like real rappers made cameos in every episode. So it was definitely a good show. And I only lasted 2 seasons, gone way too soon.
Who else was in it? Issa Rae, you said, is she the lead?
No, she's not in it. She just
Oh,
like
she
created.
created it.
Really.
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
okay. And then there's the two leads. Do you remember who play them?
So one of the girls, I think she was like from Love and Hip Hop or something, like one of those
Oh,
reality.
okay.
So they don't have a lot of acting experience. I mean, I should have written this down.
Oh, it's all good. I don't mean to. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot and be like, "Who's in it?" and all that stuff. But I've heard that it's really good, and I definitely want to check that out. But they just canceled it
Yeah, it just got canceled. So one of
after
the
two
leads is
seasons.
this rap, yeah, 2 seasons. One of the leads is this rapper named Chameleon. She's like, I guess she was on one of the Love and Hip Hop spinoffs.
Oh, so she's an actual rapper.
Yeah, she's an actual rapper. The other woman, the other main character is her name is Ada Osman. So yeah, she's written for Big Mouth and the show Betty that also came out on HBO. So she's very funny. She's like a podcaster, comedian, writer, and her rapping is just amazing in the show.
Nice. That sounds good. I like music-based shows and stuff like that. It's and so like you said, they have that's similar to my pick, but completely different. That it's like yeah, about musical artists and that. And so yeah, that's a bummer that they canceled it, but I'll have to check those out. I've heard good things about it previously, so the yeah, I've yeah, so that's cool. Oh, I guess I mean it's my turn again.
Yep.
Okay, so you know how I like to make you pick, so I have two picks left. One of them is a old show, and the other one is fairly recent, but not that recent, and definitely one that we've both seen. But the other one you maybe haven't. I don't know. Wh- Which
Okay.
which should I go with?
Dealer's choice, I guess.
Okay, yeah. All right. So I'll go with another old show, or an old show, not another old show, because it's my first old show. So I'm gonna go all the way back to the year 1992, I want to say. Is that year you were born?
It is, yep.
Okay, that's what I thought. So we're gonna go all the way back to the year you were born, and that's when this show debuted. I obviously didn't see it when it came out, but when it first aired, because I was 5 then. But I did see it much later, and it was canceled after one season. And my pick, just like my last pick, also won an Emmy in its first season and was canceled after one season. And that pick is The Ben Stiller Show. Are you familiar with The Ben Stiller Show? Yeah.
I've seen a few episodes.
I fucking love that show. It at one point in my life was the biggest influence on me ever. Even though like I have, so there's the nepotism of it all, like Ben Stiller. You know how I like to rally about nepotism a lot. And so there is the nepotism of it. And look and like in today's world, like in 2023, saying that Ben Stiller has a show that got canceled too soon seems absurd, because since then he's grossed billions of dollars and is like a huge star, and has been in all these movies. But the Ben Stiller Show in 1992 is like kind of where it all began, not just for him but for the entire like team. So for those that don't know, the Ben Stiller Show is a sketch comedy show where they do different skits or sketches. And the cast was Ben Stiller, Janine Garofalo, Bob Odenkirk, and this was their like first show. There was someone else in that cast, but I don't really want to talk about them. Canceled. And so it was created by Ben Stiller and Judd Apatow, and this was his first show. And from there, like that's Mr. Show with Bob Odenkirk and David Cross came from there. And then that's like, expanded on to really was that show was kind of the birthplace of a bunch of different people in comedy that would end up doing a lot of things, if that makes sense, in comedy. And the reason I love that show so much is because particularly when I was first starting in comedy, it kind of combined some of my exact type of comedy that I liked, and it got canceled after one season. But like, for example, they have some of the most like ridiculous pop culture mashups, particularly involving music. Like they have a parody of the like 60s sitcom The Monkees, but it's the Grungies, and they're like a 90s grunge band, which was like current at the time, but it's like with the laugh track. Or like the best example is they have a parody of Lassie, but it's Bob Odenkirk playing Charles Manson. Like Charles Manson is the pet at the house. Or there's a sketch called Oliver Stone Land, which is like if you take all the movies of Oliver Stone, each one was made into an amusement park ride. So you're on like, it's got like kids on like a ride with all the scary, like the most horrific parts of The Doors, like the trippiest parts, like it's Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, Mr. Morrison's Wild Ride. Just so funny to me. And there's a sketch with Bob Odenkirk where they try to they're life insurance salesmen, and they start following the Grateful Dead to try to sell life insurance to deadheads because it's like a new market. And Ben Stiller has never been funnier. Even I actually do very much enjoy the works of Ben Stiller, despite him being a nepo baby, and I really do like him as a comedian and filmmaker and stuff. But this is the funniest he's ever been because he didn't give a fuck. Where now he's like rich and famous and way more successful. But back then he was like making fun of people so hard. Like his Bruce Springsteen impressions were hilarious. His Bono impressions, hilarious. He does Bruce Willis, Tom Cruise, like it was Ben Stiller just like flexing every comedy muscle he has. And like I said, he's a nepo baby, which annoys me. But because he's a nepo baby, he was raised in comedy since he was like 6 years old. That's why they have the advantage, is because like both his parents were comedians, and like, so he was just really sharp at that moment in time. And I just love that show. End rant.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to watch all the episodes. Do you know if it's streaming anywhere?
That's the thing. I'm not sure. You could pirate most of them on YouTube too. Most of the sketches are on YouTube, and I think there's like full episodes on YouTube too, because it's that kind of old of a show, and I don't think anyone's really coming after it too much. But it's really funny to me. Um, and and yeah, it's just like a super pivotal show for me comedically and like inspiration wise and stuff, you know. But I digress. All right. I think you are up next.
All right. So my last show is a show that used to come on Fox in 2013. So it was when I was in college, and it was called Almost Human
Almost.
with Carl Urban and Michael Ealy. They were the main characters.
Oh, Carl Urban, right?
Yeah.
Who's like in The Boys and a bunch of other things, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So Carl Urban was playing like an old kind of grizzled detective. It's
I
the
could
year
see that.
2048. Yeah.
Oh,
It's the year
2048. Okay.
2048. Yep. So he wakes up from like a year-long coma, like missing a leg and missing huge chunks of his memory. So he's working with this like synthetic human, so basically a cyborg, like a robot, a synthetic human like sidekick who is Michael Ealy. So they like go solve
Oh.
crimes together while he was trying to like piece his memory back together. So it's like this kind of cyberpunky detective show, and Michael Ealy was just so good as the robot character. And
Mm.
like he had these like motions that were just human enough so that it wasn't creepy, but he also like did a good job of like playing this robot that's kind of like developing a personality the longer he hangs out with other humans. And he had like this sarcastic, like witty sense of humor. It was just a fun, like it was like a buddy cop show, but in like a grizzled, like cyberpunk environment. It
Dystopian
was a really
future with
weird
Carl Urban, who's just like, you know, sci-fi legend. He's just in everything. He's like
show. Yeah.
royalty, really, you know.
Yeah, and the
So
show only lasted one season. I don't know
I
anyone else
see. On
who's watched
Fox.
it. Yeah, on Fox.
Yeah, makes sense. They're like notorious for canceling shows.
Yep.
They're the ones that, you know, canceled Family Guy, canceled what's the other Arrested Development, you know, other shows. Yeah. But that's a great it's called Almost Human, right? You said? Yeah,
Yes.
let me write that down. I want to check that out. I've heard of it, but I don't know much. That I everything you told me was all news to me. I just had heard the title before, but yeah. Where is that? Is that
Definitely worth.
available or
I'm not sure, but it's definitely worth checking out. It's only one season.
for sure? I will definitely do that.
I think it's like on Tubi and
I
Amazon
see.
Prime.
Yeah. Sounds good. I will have to check that one out for sure.
Yeah, let me
All
know what you
right.
think.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I did this in the right order because I will save this one for last. So not only this next choice is gonna be super on brand for me and for the show, like this podcast and the things we've talked about the first couple of episodes. But in addition to that, is also extremely personal for me, and I'll get into that in a moment. But I, of course, am talking about the 2015 to 2018 masterpiece that aired on Netflix called Marvel's Daredevil.
Oh, yes.
Daredevil. Incredible show. How do you feel? You agree
One
with
of the
that
greatest
or
shows of all time.
correct?
All time.
Right. Netflix's Marvel's Daredevil is the best thing that Marvel has made. Anything related to like a Marvel character, it's the best TV show, hands down. Live action, it's way better than anything else. Nothing even comes close to touching how good Daredevil was. All three seasons. Season 2 was the weakest, probably because it was too many ninjas. But this show is dark, it's gritty, Charlie Cox is incredible in this show.
Fantastic.
Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin should have won every Emmy on the planet. Every
Yes.
single one. Let's see. Yeah, the whole supporting cast is great. You got our boy Eldon. I can't remember his last name, but he plays Foggy Nelson, and he was one of the Bash brothers in the Mighty Ducks back in the day. And Deborah Ann Wall as Karen Page is not only is she fantastic, we have the same birthday, so we gotta love Deborah Ann Wall.
Yes.
And this show is just, and Rosario Dawson is so great as like the nurse character that sort of helps Daredevil, and the show is just so dark and gritty, and it's like an R-rated TV show on like which it existed in a time before Disney owned all of Marvel and had control over everything, and that's exactly why Marvel canceled their best show after 3 seasons. And so Disney, when they decided, before they had launched Disney Plus, when they decided they were going to launch Disney Plus, they had already had these shows on Netflix that they were making: Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, Punisher, and Luke Cage, and The Defenders, right? The Defenders Netflix show. And they were going to launch their own platform. And in order to get the rights to those characters back, they had to not be made for 5 years. So Marvel canceled all of those shows just like that, so that 5 years later they could have the rights to Daredevil back and they could use him in the MCU. And that's why he showed up in Spider-Man. And I can tell you exactly where I was the moment that they canceled, that I found out that Daredevil was canceled. I was on set working as a production assistant on Daredevil. Big reveal. Not that big of a reveal. But yes, so I worked on the show Daredevil, which is, full disclosure, but I worked only on the 3rd season. I worked on 7 episodes as like a day player PA, not on every single day, but quite a lot. It's one of the shows I worked on the longest. Not like I really did much, but it's also my favorite thing. I've worked on it. It's the best thing that I've gotten to be on set for. I didn't really do a ton. That's a whole other thing. But they canceled this show while we were all working on it. And we found out,
Wow.
and it was for their own greed, is so that they could get it back to Disney. They canceled all the shows. And then now let's flash forward to present day. They now have the rights to Daredevil again, right? And so Daredevil showed up in Spider-Man Far From Home, or No Way Home, and then in She-Hulk. And then they are working on Daredevil Born Again, which is a reboot of Daredevil with Charlie Cox playing Daredevil. This was filming last year. And they canceled the filming of it and have decided to scrap almost everything they filmed because it wasn't turning out right. And they decided to start over again. Well, when they were filming it over the summer, there was a rule. If you worked on Daredevil for Netflix, you could not work on this show. They didn't have any of the crew, nobody. And it was in the media too, like the stunt coordinator, one of the stunt team guys, who that show's stunts were phenomenal. They had one take hallway shots that would be a 20-minute fight scene down a hallway. They had one every single season. And he was in the press saying that they wouldn't hire him and they weren't hiring anybody. And let's just say I know that they weren't. I don't know if that's changed now. I don't know who's working on it now, but they did. And they weren't bringing back Karen Page. They weren't bringing back any of the supporting cast besides the main 2. And they decided to scrap it all. So that's why I think this show was canceled too soon. That's why I bring it up as a show for an example, because of the reasons that it was canceled. It was the best show that Marvel had. It's one of the best superhero shows ever made. And they pulled the plug just because of greed, because they make more money off of having it on their own platform, like of having a hit show on Netflix that they got this much of the pie, like a piece of the pie, wasn't enough for Disney. They needed to have the whole pie, have it on their thing. So they ruined something good. And I lost a job. We've only got few minutes left here. I'm sorry I've been ranting and raving about Daredevil, but man, that pisses me off. I'm angry now just thinking about it. I'm tentatively looking forward to the new one that's coming. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm trying to have hope for Daredevil Born Again, but Daredevil on Netflix was one of, like I said, one of the greatest shows of all time. The acting was fantastic, the cinematography, the fight scenes were so beautifully choreographed. So it definitely is one that hurt me when it got canceled.
Yeah, and they've been teasing us with the bringing like we're getting to see Charlie Cox here and there, and then getting to see Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin, which has been okay. Echo was good. I liked him in Echo, and I'm optimistic about the reboot of it, but we'll see. I'm a little
Yeah.
scared because it was one of the best shows ever, and it's one of my favorite shows. It is just so good. And I will say, from working on it, all of those people that I named, I don't usually. Everybody in Hollywood sucks. Every actor I've ever worked with sucks pretty much. The people on that show were super nice. Vincent D'Onofrio, Charlie Cox were some of like the nicest people ever that I've ever like worked with. Were genuinely like good people and stuff. So that was super fun and nice. And it's sad that they canceled it, but all because of this bullshit. But we'll see, we'll see how the new one is. But it's still, even if it's great, I'm still gonna feel some kind of way about it just because of the way in which everything went down. And so, I mean, I guess 2 of my 3 picks were Disney. were yeah. So, but yeah. Okay, so to sum up, my 3 were Muppet Mayhem, The Ben Stiller Show, and Daredevil. And your 3 were?
My Name is Earl, Rap Shit, and Almost Human.
Those are 2 pretty solid lists. I haven't seen everything on your list. I've only seen one. I've seen My Name is Earl, and I'm familiar with Rap Shit and haven't seen it, and not really familiar with Almost Human. So that's good. That gives me some homework. And I think one that's basically the same with you on mine. One of them you've seen, one of them you've not seen any of, and barely even heard of, and the other one you've seen some of, or so.
Yep. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm definitely gonna
that's
have to
good.
check out Muppet Mayhem. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. At the least, like you got to give it like 5 episodes. They're only half hour. It's really light. It's good. Everyone listening, go watch Muppet Mayhem. If you're listening, if you're watching, definitely leave us a comment. Tell us what you think of our lists and tell us what your choices are. Maybe we'll read your comment when we're on here next week. So I guess I would say, we're, something of a podcast. It's at something of a pod on Instagram, YouTube, something of a podcast. We're on Spotify and Libsyn and Google Podcasts, and I think pretty much everywhere that you get your podcasts, and the places that we're not, we're working on getting on there next. I'm Mike Gamms. You can follow me at Mike Gamms on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, whatever. With me is Kai VonDoom. Say,
I'm Kai
you have any
VonDoom. You can
plugs?
follow me on TikTok at Kai_VonDoom77.
Hell yeah. And I guess I don't have any other final thoughts before we go here.
No, me either.
All right, so I guess this is something of goodbye, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye.
You know, I'm I'm something of a podcast myself. I'm something of a podcast myself. You know, I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast myself.